Everybody, this is the DRC meeting for Battery District Site C. I am Christina Sorrento. I'm the Chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division, and your lead reviewer today is Grace Bogdan. The purpose of this meeting is really for the applicant to ask any questions you have based upon the comments you received. I'll have Grace first just highlight any of the major issues we should discuss and then turn it over to the applicant. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Grace.
Thank you. I just want to say we are really excited to have the first site of Battery Lane come in. Being the actual reviewer for the sketch plan, it's really nice to have this continuum. So site C, let's go. I think the first main comment that we have, and this came from multiple reviewers, and I understand that you started your intake process early and then we continued with the design advisory panel process. There were a lot of inconsistencies through a lot of the sheets, and we know that the dog run moved, but I think there were other inconsistencies in terms of landscaping elsewhere on the site and curb locations. And so in the next submittal, it will be really important to make sure that throughout those inaccuracies are fixed. And then moving on to agency comments, stormwater, there is the request to revise your 2019 stormwater concept approval. In terms of fire, and I know Marie is not here today to speak to it, but she said that the way the bike lane is currently designed obstructs the 50-foot from the lobby entrance. And so obviously that is something that we are all going to have to work towards with the design of the bike lane, but also following up with her specifically on what she needs. And then moving straight into DPS, who's going to be the lead for DOT in terms of the bike lane design. We know that there is already a meeting being coordinated for the interim and ultimate design, and how that just needs to come into conformance with the sketch and preliminary plan conditions in terms of timing and sequencing. And then there is a separate request from DPS in specifics of how we're going to sequence these frontage improvements in more detail. And then I think this was a question that sort of started with our sketch and preliminary plan as to who's going to be maintaining the streets. Would it be the applicant? Would it be BUP, or would it be DOT? Because I think right now the tree spacing is not something, it's not conforming to DOT standards. And if that is something that the applicant would want to maintain, I think that's something that we need to figure out as we move forward or come into the DOT tree spacing requirements. DPS spacing requirements. For environmental, just a quick note in terms of the FCP, we're requesting that you work with your neighbors to address the tree save. There are several trees that do straddle the property line or are just off-site. So moving forward, we want to make sure that those trees are being saved as in terms of the plan development. And then moving into planning, a lot of my comments had focused on the public benefit points at the package. Originally, we started at, I think you're totaled at 135 public benefit points, but as I moved into each of the categories, it looks like there's several that are calculating the categories incorrectly. In terms of vegetated roof, you're trying to take points for what is considered stormwater, and so those two can't overlap. But there are other areas on the site, I think, that would be considered vegetated roof that are not being used for stormwater. So we have to figure out how you can find points in that category that are not being used to satisfy your stormwater requirements. In terms of minimum parking, the calculation, I think, was using the wrong number. And so you go from 18 down to 7 points. For wayfinding, this was something that was flagged at sketch plan. We did think that for the Battery District in its entirety, it would be a good idea to have a wayfinding system, but that is something that we wanted to have developed in coordination with BUP. And I reached out to Jeff Burton at BUP, and he said that there has not, he hasn't been contacted yet to develop that. And quite honestly, I didn't see any details in the proposal for the wayfinding signage. And then lastly, in terms of dwelling unit mix, it doesn't appear that your percentage actually fits the category of points that you're looking for, but it would be a lower category. So when we look at those in totality, it looks like you're getting closer to maybe just making the 100 minimum points. But what we see here is an opportunity, and in a lot of the comments, you'll see there's been concerns about the design of the through block connections. We think that there's ways that the design of the connections can be strengthened in a way that you could probably be seeking more points there. We are looking for a minimum 15 feet for the through block connections. That is a requirement for your public benefit points. And in a lot of the pre-submission meetings, we had been requesting more than 6 feet. We've been requesting closer to 10 feet. And so we do think that there's areas where these connections can be strengthened. And in terms of the design, coming in from Battery Lane and what the experience is going to be throughout the through block connections, we think there's points where we could better the design and make it more meaningful. And we'd be happy to have a separate follow-up meeting before your next resubmittal to go through those points. So those are the high points for now. We can turn it over to you. Doug, Nancy, I'm not sure who's speaking first. Nancy, you're on mute.
Yeah. So this is Nancy Reglin from Shulman Rogers representing Brown Development. So Grace, you hit on a lot of the issues that we also highlighted and we're concerned about. So the public benefit points, absolutely, we're concerned about that. And we want to make sure that we get those correctly. So we do think a separate meeting to go through some of those to see where we can go. I do want to tell you on the MPDU mix, the mix of units, that calculation, even since we submitted, there's been a tweaking of the mix of units. So at this point, we're at 20 points, straightforward. So we'll continue tweaking that. And then I think we'll also have that as part of that discussion on public benefit points. And we are, of course, the primary thing that we are concerned about is this whole public realm circulation through block connections, which I think is what we should spend most of our time today talking about. One of the points that you mentioned was this property isn't actually in the urban district. So I know BUP does agreements outside of it. And in fact, at sketch plan and preliminary plan, this site actually proposed ending the brick sidewalk along the frontage and transitioning to a more residential scored concrete along the front. And that's actually what our preliminary plan shows. So we do want to talk about that because we're not really sure. Again, as you said, DOT or BUP may not be interested in maintaining that frontage if everything isn't exactly per the streetscape standards. So we do want to sort of see what our options are here because we designed to the preliminary plan, which shows the 6-foot scored concrete sidewalk along the front. So we do want to talk about that frontage and to see where you guys are coming from on that so that we can take that back and think that through. And then the next thing is we do want to talk about these through block connections and really see if we can come to, see some clarity about where we were trying to go and some clarity about where you're trying to get us to. So thoughts on the scored concrete and the for the street frontage?
Sure. I know that, well, I guess we have to look back at the sections of the preliminary plan. I don't know if we fully appreciated the materials that were being shown at that time, but I know that there's a sketch and maybe even a preliminary plan condition requiring that the Bethesda streetscape be installed along the site frontages. So we'll have to wrestle how that is being dealt with.
Typically, the streetscape gets finalized at the time of site plan. So,
okay.
And also I want to make sure that we take a look at what's going on across at 4901 Battery. So matching.
Right, because I think we did have a similar comment for 4901 Battery Lane, and I think that the Bethesda streetscape pavers are going in there. So.
Yeah, and that's a vicious circle because 4901 originally submitted following the Battery District plans. So
understand, but we need them to be consistent. So correct. We don't want one site having something different than the other sites. So
correct. So I just think there's some cohesiveness, but if scored concrete is a better material to go into the residential neighborhood, like we should be making those decisions soon. Because 4901 isn't approved yet, so.
It says streetscape standards, and we'd have to modify the conditions. So.
Hey Nancy, this is Rebecca from DOT. I think I would say, can we do scored concrete? I mean, what, or just regular standard concrete that we have that, so that since we don't have up, we wouldn't have to do a maintenance agreement unless,
Just want to see
I mean, we whatever we decide we have to do for the whole entire block.
Right. And Rebecca, I think one other thing that I want to make sure that we highlight here is, in addition to the consistency issue, we also need to just double check what conditions of approval were for previous approvals to make sure that, like, if that needs to be amended, that that's all taken care of. So there are a couple of moving parts, but I think you're right. We want to have a thought about how this works.
But which projects have been approved, I guess?
You're right. 4901 is not finalized yet.
No, but the sketch and preliminary plan for the Battery District does mention the Bethesda Streetscape standards.
Right. So that's,
And I think the sketch plan for 4901 also mentions it as well. So we're talking about a kind of a.
I mean,
Pulling
if the problem is that it's not in the BUP and it's not, and so DOT doesn't want to maintain anything outside of what we normally maintain.
right. No, I think we understand that. And I think we're willing to look at the other options. We just, if it's in the conditions though, then those conditions have to be modified to reflect these changes. That's all.
I mean, it seems to me a very detailed comment that shouldn't have been placed in the sketch plan. It should have been in a preliminary plan, which is where we define
Well, so
improvements.
the preliminary plan's been approved already for this site.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. So
Okay.
this is the site plan now. So we have to go back and take a look to see what the condition stated. And if we need to modify it, we modify it. If we all decide that the scored concrete is a better option. I see Atul has popped on. It looks like he wants to say something.
Good morning, everyone. For those who I don't know on this call, my name is Atul Sharma. I'm in the director's office, and we look at the design of projects with all the area teams, so helping Paul do some of his work. So I just wanted to mention that a couple of things. One, that this conversation about the paving material for the sidewalk should also take into account the space between the frontage of the building to the right-of-way line. So one of the benefits of doing something like a red brick is that the transitions are much more easy to achieve in that space between the frontage of the building, that the area that would be under the tall arcade that you all are providing, and the materials that would go into that. With scored concrete, you'll have to think of different materials perhaps to make that transition be seamless. In other words, what we don't want, and Trini, I hope you can appreciate this, is that we have a scored concrete 5-foot sidewalk that then suddenly abruptly transitions into some type of a paver that doesn't really match the character of the street or address the recommendations in the sector plan. So I just wanted to mention that. I think consistency across both the streets, I just want to reinforce that is really important, because otherwise we get these haphazard sort of streetscape standards that don't really create a cohesive sense of place in across streets. So I just wanted to add those couple of thoughts. So it's not just about the sidewalk. I think the space where the building and is sitting and the space between the sidewalk and the face of the building is equally important for this.
Yeah, and I think Atul, part of that, and we have a huge front porch that is extending out towards the sidewalk. So Trini and the architectural team will look at that very carefully. But for cohesiveness in this neighborhood, that's part of our concern, is that there's so many properties in Battery Lane that will not redevelop, and they all have sidewalks, and the park has a sidewalk, and it's all concrete. So we wanted to make a nice transition at this property, which is one property back from Woodmont, and then it would be a nice cohesive transitioning to concrete sidewalk going down. We'd still do the canopy corridor with the double row of trees and try to green everything up, but that's the direction that we had shown on preliminary plan. And when you look at our sections on the preliminary plan, it clearly calls out that we're doing the concrete, and it's a 6-foot sidewalk. So, all right, well, let's circle back on that. We'll provide you some additional information on that as well when we respond. And maybe when we have a meeting with planning, we'll have that in more, more in-depth conversation, and then we'll circle back and pull everybody back in. Let's talk about the circulation through the site and particularly these 2 through block connections. And so Doug, it's 1:45. We have 15 minutes left. So I don't know if you want to just give a very brief, because we do want to have a discussion about what the staff is thinking for grant entries and all of that. But we wanted to sort of reiterate again about what we were trying to do between the east and the west through block connections.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. And if Bob, you could pull up our sketch plan, that might be a way for me to introduce this. What I want to explain is our rationale. How did we arrive at this design for these through block connections on Site C? And it really goes back to our sketch plan. We took a comprehensive approach, 5 sites, as you well know. And our vision was to enhance this residential neighborhood through enhancing the connectivity, improving it. And so what did we do? We first looked at what are the major unifying elements. It's the trolley trail through the urban park, and it's Battery Lane. So we're going to improve the trolley trail next to our Site D and expand and improve it where the mid-block through to the park. And then we're going to add the cycle track from Battery, the entire length of Battery from Woodmont all the way over to Old Georgetown. Separated 2-way cycle track. So what do we do? And then we looked at what can we do to improve this pedestrian connectivity. And of course, we're going to do all of the frontage improvements, just like are reflected in our application for Site C and for the other sites as they are redeveloped. But we wanted to overlay that with internal pedestrian connections. And that's what these 2 through block connections are that we're going to talk about for Site C. There's also one behind Site A, similarly, and potentially one at Site E that might link back to the park. We were encouraged by actually the design advisory panel to take liberties off-site to show how ultimately this network could connect. But we always viewed this as pedestrian connections. We're connecting the sidewalk on Battery Lane on both sides of Site C down to the sidewalk on Rugby. It creates a porous neighborhood. It's redundancy to Woodmont. But as we begin to really analyze and evaluate the kind of origin destination and how this would really be utilized by this neighborhood, how the flow from the employment centers to the north down to the trolley trail and how that might spread out or not, and similarly coming up from the more concentrated areas and density in the south, as well as then internally in this neighborhood. And what we see are 2 pedestrian connections. They do not border streets. They border our amenity space and green space for our residents. So in our mind, there needs to be a great deal of sensitivity to how the scale and how they coexist with these other amenity spaces. So we really want to meet again and get into this in great detail. We've looked at some European models and the way, bicycles really have a space and they know where it is and they don't get confused by seeing a wide walkway. Can I just, is that for me? That you can really get the clues that when you're experiencing this neighborhood, it's like, well, this is where I want to go as a pedestrian. And similarly, if Stone Hall at the corner, if someone lives at the corner there at Battery at Woodmont, and they say, well, Woodmont's a busy street, I can just come over and go through this connection that's a little softer and quieter. So we view this as really needing to be scaled appropriately for that type of use. And maybe that's enough to say about it at this point. We think it's going to really be an important character defining element in how it's designed. And we want to make sure that experience is something that will set a precedent for the other sites on Battery Lane. Continue to.
Yeah, and the other thing is we also looked at hierarchy, and that's why the east is open, and we can talk a little bit about that in the width, which had always been planned to be widened eventually when site B came in. So we were showing a 6-foot path plus landscaping, anticipating that when site B came in, that path could be extended at its entry from Battery Lane. And we were providing a more of a deep mid-block residential, feel comfortable, feel less hierarchical, heavily landscaped on the west side along the 2-story residential units that we have, which we know that can't terminate now, and we know of no plans for the adjacent property facing on Rugby to ever redevelop. So we're not aware of that, of when they might ever have a connection through. So we do want to talk about that. Can I get some clarification? Because one of the things that you guys have mentioned in here is the idea of a grand entry, or is that just a term you're using, or are you looking for something like 4901 did with just some benches and landscaping right at the entrance? Like, what are you thinking?
I mean, yes, it was a term that I think we sort of ended up using, grand entry, but I think we were specifically looking at the western connection and how it comes off of Battery Lane. And our concern and thought behind that is we want to make sure that people who are walking on Battery Lane when they come here, they know that it's not just for, the walk-up entryways. This is a public space. And so we were wondering if there was any way that we could open this area, perhaps provide some seating walls that surround those electrical vaults and make it more inviting and make that just symbolize that area coming in. We also want to know, how is this going to transition in our minds? We were then talking about the Bethesda Streetscape pavers, obviously, but material-wise, how is this going to help draw people in to make sure it's a continuum of public space? And then we do get into, the discussion of how does the furniture, how does the lighting, and at what level does that play into making that space more inviting? So yeah, I said grand entry, but we can decide on a different term if that's,
okay,
at issue.
that's what I was trying to figure out, what you meant by grand entry, because we were trying to do hierarchical here, but I understand if you're just trying to have it open and make people understand they can come in, that it's public, I think we can work towards that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think some of the comments that were made previously about looking at the design of the paving in this area, the lighting in this area, I don't think our priority here is to turn this into a major bike connection so that people can speed up and down this block on their bikes. But we do want to make sure that there's an invitation to the public to use it, but use it in a way that's much more passive and slow speed. If there is a cyclist that wants to come and use this to get to one of the other streets abutting the property, the design of it should be such that they are invited to use it, but when they're in it, they feel the urge to dismount and walk their cycles because the paving is a certain type and the lighting is a certain type and there is seating and other things happening along it that nudge you. And European examples are very good at that. I think they do a great job of delineating space, but also guiding the user of that space to behave appropriately in that space. So I think that's where our comments, and in fact, some of the features that are being discussed to create this entrance are being shown in certain other parts of the site. So for example, on the bottom right of this image, you can see where the sidewalks connect. There's a little paved space there. It becomes more than just a pedestrian connection. And I think we are looking for certain similar things along the other entrance as well. And there are some opportunities there with the utility vaults and things like that that might help create some more permanent seating that screens some of that. And, I think wayfinding and signage, as discussed previously, is going to be really important as well to make sure that it is used in a way that makes those intentions known. It's a public space, but certainly not a high-speed bike connection.
Yeah, we were trying to give priority, as Doug said, to pedestrians because one lot away in each direction, they have cycle tracks or cycle paths. So, okay.
Can I just follow up on 2 more points, Nancy? To the point that you made about the Western connection and how it doesn't connect to Rugby, and how there's no opportunity or on the table right now for that site to redevelop. We understand that, but we also need to know, we need to operate in the sense that at some point that site will redevelop, and how is that through block connection going to get connected? So if your intention is not to bring it to the property line, we need to know at what point when that site redevelops, how can that site come onto your property to finish this connection? And so we need to figure out those details. And I think that discussion was had similarly at 4901 Battery Lane, and I think there were some environmental resources that had chosen us to not bring the connections to the property line. That's not the issue here. So we just want to be able to work through that in that location. And then in terms of the eastern through block connection, I do recall, as you said, that Site B would eventually redevelop, and it would be a larger through block connection at that point. I think when I was looking at the section in this area and then looked at Google Street View, it made me realize that, there is already a sidewalk on the adjacent property. And so I was wondering how this is going to look in the interim, knowing that Site B is going to be your last site to come on board, and it might be closer to 2 decades before that even happens. And so how is this space going to look in the interim, considering it's going to be a long interim? If there's any way, perhaps because you guys, in this opportunistic way do own the adjacent site, could there be a way to combine the sidewalks at this point and make that space better?
Okay, we'll look at that. Thank you. Okay, and I know you commented on how 4901 resolved their future connections, which is there are nodes there that give lots of flexibility for wherever the sidewalk needs to go in the future to connect to a future adjacent site. So just like Atul said, maybe there's a larger gathering space at the intersection of the western and the rear one that gives lots of flexibility on where that sidewalk can come off in the future. So we'll look at that as well. All right, I think we're out of time, correct?
We have 3 minutes. I can talk.
I think we have a lot of other meetings to schedule with you guys, so.
Yeah. So in terms of schedule, the 120-day date sort of slams right around Christmas time, and so that obviously isn't going to work. So we've backtracked it to a 12/15 planning board date, knowing that we have a lot of follow-up meetings. This is probably just going to be a timeline that we're just going to have to adjust as we move forward. But I'll go ahead and give you the back dates based on that. And so your first resubmittal would be due September 28th. And I've adjusted the final to be October 17th, final submittal, with agency letters due on Halloween, 10/31, and a 12/5 posting.
Okay. Okay, and then one of the last dates in for a planning board.
I'm sorry, what?
So a planning board date potentially being.
December 15th.
15th, okay. All right, well, we'll talk internally and just see if that works or, what we need in order to respond to all these comments. So thanks for all of your comments. We obviously didn't have a great deal of time to digest them or to drill down. So that's what the team will be working on from. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
bye-bye.
you.
This is the DRC meeting for Waters Village. I am Christina Sorrento. I am the chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division. And your lead reviewers today are Alex and Dupree and Jonathan Casey. The purpose of this meeting is really for the applicant to ask any questions you may have based upon the comments you received. I'll ask Alex and Jonathan first to just highlight any of the major issues we should talk about, and then we'll turn it over to the applicant. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. So go right ahead.
Great. So just to introduce the project, it's on Waters Road in Germantown, Maryland. It's about 3.49 acres. It's a preliminary and site plan application. It's in the commercial residential town 1 FAR zoning. The master plans are the 2019 MARC Rail Communities Sector Plan and the 2009 Germantown Employment Area Sector Plan. They are offering a redevelopment with a 1-story Goodwill, another 1-story retail building, and a restaurant with a drive-through. And other development on the site includes a surface parking area, site improvements along Waters Road, stormwater management and associated utilities. It fronts on Waters Road, Wisteria Drive, Waters House Ave. And they are also proposing around 12,000 and a little bit more of public open space square feet. So some of the things we'd like to hear about from the applicant include reconfiguration of buildings on the site and transportation improvements on Waters Road. Is there anything you'd like to add?
This is Jonathan Casey. Just to kind of support Alex in what she was saying, I'd say circulation is probably our biggest issue with this application. Nothing really new. We've dealt with this on the pre-application as well. The drive-through is really I would say the biggest issue here. I know the applicant is trying to incorporate the drive-through if it's possible, but given the site constraints, that the current location is just not providing a logical or safe on-site circulation for vehicles or pedestrians. And our design team has come up with a concept that we will share a little bit later that we think it does not include a drive-through, but it does kind of improve the site overall. As far as frontage improvements go, we've noted that the frontages don't seem to be being improved in accordance with the master plan. And that goes for Waters Road as well as Waters House Road. So I think that's about it. We'll just go to the applicant and it's your meeting, so.
Hey, good morning, everyone. It's Stuart Barr with Lurch, Hurley & Brewer. We're the zoning attorneys for this project, and we have our project team. Also, some representatives from Goodwill are tuning in to hear the discussion this morning. Thank you all for the comments. Appreciate it. I'm not going to introduce all of our team members, but we're all listening intently, obviously. So I want to go through the big items that you highlighted, Jonathan and Alex, and talk for a minute about those. So first of all, just some quick background that we did sign a lease agreement with Goodwill almost 2 years ago to provide their building and obviously access and parking to their building. So that's the most important component of this project. And over the last 2 years, we've been flipping this plan every which way to try to make it work. Originally, Goodwill, I think, was up against Waters Road and then down closer to Waters House, and then now up against Wisteria. And I think, unless I'm just missing something, I don't see any concerns with the current location of the Goodwill building, which is good because, again, that's the most important thing. Obviously, we need the truck access and the donor drop off where it is to make a Goodwill store work. So hoping those work the way they are currently. I understand the comments about the drive-through. because we got similar comments at concept plan. If I can share my screen, I think this is just a little bit of an easier plan to work with. I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on whether this works or not, the drive-through and the donor drop-off. I understand that when we were concept and we were proposing also a connection point to the site from Wisteria, so you had a driveway from Wisteria plus the donor drop-off plus the drive-through customers, that was probably creating too much at that location. So we acknowledged that, but we got rid of the driveway from Wisteria, and we just believe that with cars dropping off at the Goodwill that are stopped there, drive-through customers that are stopped, as long as this site distance remains clear, they're going to be able to see each other and they're going to be able to merge and get out safely. I just think it does work from our perspective. Now, look, I want to make this project work. I want to move it forward. I want to get an approval. So if we need to explore pulling the drive-through down to the lower part of the site where this retail is currently, we will do that. We would prefer it at the corner. It works better for us from a visibility standpoint, but we will look at that, pulling the drive-through down, which I guess would be consistent with one of the concepts that we got about a year ago, showing a drive-through on the lower part of the site. So we will look at that. We do note that there appears to be a difference between, showing the other building on Wisteria versus now the concept that I think you all were planning to show with the buildings closer to Waters. I think can look at having the other retail building up against Waters as opposed to Wisteria. That seems to be the preference now. So we will investigate that. But we do want a drive-through on the site, and we'll look at relocating it.
Yeah, Stuart. Look, we're not like throwing buildings around, changing preferences. We're trying to work like with what your program is. I think we're getting closer, and we were just trying to respond to your most recent evolution. And so, I think from our standpoint, we still felt that Wisteria would have been the preference, but trying to work with you and your programming on site. So
okay. Yeah, appreciate that. So balls in our court to look at flipping those. As far as some of the other things, I mean, obviously, then a lot of things then are impacted, circulation, parking, and so forth. So we'll just have to see how that unfolds. I guess the comment about that we're not providing the correct frontage improvements per the master plan, I guess we'll have to talk with our group, because we thought we would propose that correctly, but we'll investigate that. I'd like to talk about the Waters Wisteria intersection, because I think that we're not in sync on what the comments are, or the basis for the comments rather. So here's the current, everyone hopefully can still see this. Here's the current intersection here with Waters and Wisteria kind of intersecting at somewhat of an angle. The right turn that allows you to take that right from Waters onto Wisteria, our client provided that the right of way for that turn movement within the past several years, and that improvement was made. So as you're traveling, I guess it would be kind of northbound on Waters, you have a stop sign at both those turn movements, and the way the alignment works now is you can go right across Wisteria to travel to Waters Road on the other side. Conversely, if you're coming from the other direction on Waters, that would be, I coming from this side of Wisteria, you can easily get across Wisteria given the alignment as it currently exists. So we think it works. If we need to, restripe this to make it more clear for pedestrians, we can certainly update those crosswalks. But just not understanding the comment about let me pull it. Eliminating the right turn lane and the island. So if we need to have a follow-up meeting with DOT about that, we can. But want to talk about the terminus of Waters House. We can certainly look at a hammerhead arrangement here. This is just my personal thought on it. I was hoping or thinking that we could have some kind of gate or bollards or something that were located so that no one, needed to go down and make a turn around. But we can certainly look at a hammerhead configuration if that's the strong preference. I just think it makes more sense to have like a temporary gate or bollards, but we can talk about that further. I do want to just reiterate how important it is for us to get the Goodwill building approved in December at our hearing date. Under the timeframes, again, we have an agreement in place. We've, spent the last couple of years modifying the plan and really need to move that forward to meet the deadlines. So if that means we need to phase things, so be it. But we really got to get this Goodwill building approved and underway as quickly as possible. I'm going to flip through some of the other comments. Brian, did you want to ask anything specific? Brian Donnelly from McCrease Hendricks is our civil.
I guess just, how we set up the right-of-way cross sections based on the previous approval for Waters Road that was built across the street. And so that's kind of the cross section we held.
Hey, Brian, you're probably referencing my comment. Yeah, that cross section was approved as modified based on the available right of way. If you look at the master plan, there's actually a cross section in the 2009. Well, I think actually in the Mark Rupp plan as well, that shows a configuration with parking on both sides, a tree panel, sidewalk, and basically it's somewhat similar to what's on the other side. That cross section was only approved that way because they were working with limited frontage. Limited dedication at the time. Since you're going to be dedicating with this application, that provides the full right-of-way width to improve it to meet what was envisioned by the master plan.
But I guess because of the right turn lane, we really can't fit any parallel spaces in to make it parking on both sides. But unless you're okay with eliminating that right turn lane.
Well, and I think we made that comment as well. Eliminating that right turn lane would fit with the cross section. It would also allow for adding the on-street parking, maybe not all the way along the entire frontage, but at least in some locations.
But I guess part of the intent is to slow the cars down, I think is
yeah.
Kind of what part of the intent is.
This is a business district street. And so, people flying through is not really what we're going for. And we've actually heard from a community member too about people doing exactly that currently.
Design speed, yeah.
And as far as the Waters House Road goes, you've you've nailed the cross section with the exception of street trees.
Yeah.
I believe that was the only thing that was missing there. I think double check the, I think there's calls for parallel parking along that road also. I'm not sure how many spots should be able to fit along the shorter sections just because of the curve, but that is something that you at least need to look at.
Okay. Yeah, I guess even if you get put even 1 or 2 spaces, is probably begins to meet the intent of the speed.
Yeah, and just double check the master plan because it's pretty definitive on what is envisioned out there.
Yeah. Okay, can we speak a little bit further on the Waters Road realignment? I mean, that's obviously a huge impact to this layout. There is right away on the other side of Wisteria Drive, so that's why we, don't think it's a good idea to relocate. And I understand the intent is to make a 90-degree connection. I mean, that's always what we want to do. But because there's an extended right of way on the other side of Wisteria, then that alignment no longer works.
This is Rebecca with DOT. I think at this point we should just talk to traffic staff about it and see what they think. So we can have a working meeting. We'll talk to them, but then Billy will set up a meeting with them.
Okay.
And then we'll come back to you and we'll set up a meeting with you guys to talk about it.
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah, just to, and look, I know this is an oversimplification, but just to communicate, I mean, very frequently in our regulatory applications, we're placing much heavier emphasis on Vision Zero pedestrian and bike movements and removing free rights, pork chops, islands, whatever we're calling them. So this is not unique to this project. We're dealing with this issue on almost every project that we have. So just making sure it's clear. We're not picking on you. It's something we're very
no. I'm not thinking you're picking on us. It's just there's a reason why we connected this street because there is right away master plan across the street. That's but I understand what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But the intent is.
No, and we're hearing you. So we do, I think, need to talk about this and how the best way to go about, solving this issue. So.
Yeah, and we don't want to dismiss any of those objectives about Vision Zero or making things safer. I mean, obviously, we want to have a reasonable discussion about making sure pedestrians can circulate safely. They're at our community outreach meeting. Some of the neighbors, did emphasize that they want to make sure they can, walk around safely with their families. We obviously want to support that. And so we can talk about ways to do that if we feel like we need to do some in connection with this project. At the same time, though, we want to make sure we're getting, juice out of that squeeze and that we are improving the situation in a reasonable way. And we're just not quite seeing it yet with this intersection, with the ideas that have been raised thus far.
Yeah. Now, and look, I mean, we kind of jumped right into issues, but taking a step back with the the residential community to the west of here, the train station and the formal connection of Waters Road to that station, seeing what you're trying to do on this site, grand aspirations someday across Wisteria Drive, that shopping center gets redeveloped as well. We're really seeing some of the framework of a town center come together, a main street, et cetera, and really want to put this project in the best position to succeed here moving forward, that we get all these pieces in place. We're not looking at this in isolation, so we really are trying to make sure that we get it right with this very important step. So appreciate that you're here moving forward and trying to figure these things out together.
Well, when do we expect
Understood.
comments on the traffic study?
Hi, this is Billy Whalen. We're still reviewing the TIS. should.
I'm sorry, was the question, when are we getting comments? I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, the comments were due, this last week. So, we just need to know what, how that is going to impact our infrastructure.
This is Rebecca Tormer from DOT. Did we approve a scope form? Did DOT and planning hand you a signed scoping form?
Scoping? Do we approve scoping?
I don't think so.
Yes. Chris,
Yes.
are you on?
We
What-
scoped this with Chris Van Alstyne, and then DOT had some comments, and as SHA did as well.
Okay. Chris is out, I think, on leave, right?
Yeah, Chris
Yeah.
is on leave, that's correct, and we have Brett Brown filling in for Chris as much as possible. So
Yeah.
he's here,
When's
he's
Chris
sitting
come
here
back?
in 2 weeks
Oh, well.
from yesterday.
Because
I think
we
the
had
scope-
some.
The
we had
scoping
some
form that's in the
intersections that-
TIS isn't signed.
Right. So
Yeah, but there was some. I'm sorry, there was some correspondence. That
I know,
went
but you're
back and forth.
right, but I think we need to look at it again and make sure that everything was completed as we requested. Because it was not signed, and you shouldn't proceed without a signed scoping form. Unfortunately, Chris is out, and I looked through my emails and I did not see where I signed it. So we need to make sure that everything was adequately addressed.
I mean,
Okay,
for what
I
it's
think-
worth, my recollection is that we provided more information on more intersections than we thought we needed to under the standards. So,
Well, I think we need to just get back into it and look at it in more detail.
Yeah, we'll do that, Rebecca.
Okay.
Well, part of the reason why I ask and a little anxious to get those comments is that we're on a pretty strict schedule with trying to deliver some of these buildings. So that's really why we need to kind of get this thing as complete as we can.
Right, but you shouldn't proceed without a signed scoping form.
understood.
So who has the scoping form at the moment? Is it us? Or is it DOT or the applicant?
I believe it got we got dropped. It got dropped, and then I know there was comments sent. So I'll take a look through my emails and see what I can find. And
Yeah,
I'll
we'll
coordinate
do
with
the
Brett Brown.
same.
And then
We'll do the same because I think the last thing was confirming the study intersections. And there was some, that's what I was saying about the correspondence, Rebecca. So we'll
Right.
get together and share those with you if they're not in the appendix.
yeah.
And then we'll just come to the agreement.
Yeah, I like I said, I just can't remember exactly what we did or what we said.
And Chris and Rebecca, if there's anything you need from us while Chris Van Alstyne is out, please don't hesitate to reach out either to myself or Brett. We'll try to fill in as much as possible, and we want definitely to keep things moving on our end.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, sure.
Well, there was a, you guys had some issues with the drive-through in its current location. I mean, do you have any issues with the drive-through on the site in the back portion of the property? Or is it just strictly the drive-through that you're opposed to?
Are you referring to locating the drive-through in this area where you had like?
Yeah, exactly. Somewhere down there. Because the sketch you provided didn't show any drive-through. And I just want to make sure we're not.
In general, we prefer not to have the drive-through. But if, we're going to pull out it's a deal breaker card, then yes, that would be the location that it would have to be.
Okay, all right.
To eliminate conflict with the drop off, and essentially its current presence is just at one of the, it's right at the intersection. There should be plenty of visibility, even at the southern retail location for any business as a drive-through.
Yeah, Brian, I don't know if our urban designer is on the call, but I'll jump in here for a second and then turn it over if he's here. We have serious concerns with the location that you're proposing for the drive-through. That's the least ideal place to have the drive-through, not just because of visibility, but also because of pedestrian vehicular conflicts within the site and also the current layout of the Goodwill store. So if you were to keep a drive-through on this proposal, it needs to move. And we think that the lower corner is probably the best location out of the way and will still enable us to have safe, adequate, and efficient vehicular circulation and pedestrian bicycle through the site. So that's our thought. I also want to add that our concept and our thinking was revised from the version that you saw in the couple months ago with a concept plan application. So I really want you all to maybe I see Paul has jumped into the on the call. But there's several things here that we want to highlight with building orientation towards Waters Road rather than Wisteria. So,
Hi.
okay, so sorry. So I see that Roberto and Paul are on the call. I'm going to turn it over to them to elaborate a little bit more on the design comments. And I'm here still available for questions if you have any.
Sure. This is Roberto, just real quick, and Paul, you can really elaborate. We just want to create a better relationship.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
You're
Sorry,
kind of,
Roberto.
you're kind of breaking
You're
up.
really,
Roberto.
yeah, that's not going to work.
Do you hear me?
It's very broken up.
No. Paul, do you want to elaborate then, or?
Yeah, I can do it, Paul, or if you want to, go ahead.
I think that when we look at the overall site, I think the things that we're concerned about and would I think are trying to emphasize actually in this drawing and in the comments that we provided in the past is that we're trying to help you and the site to make the most that we can out of the most street frontages. And so with the idea that, you have a street frontage, particularly with Goodwill on Wisteria, and then a street frontage that's very walkable, very inviting particularly to the community across the street on Waters. And so that's why we keep on coming back to this. And I just from our past experiences, at least, we've also found that some of these retail spaces that particularly they're more on kind of a spec type of situation, when you carve away the volumes, rather than adding to the volumes, which we've tried to do here, they're a little bit less. And it's not less likely, but they're harder to lease when you have a strange kind of configuration. So we've tried to show on this, street frontages facing onto Waters that would be the primary kind of pedestrian and fronts of the retail. The Goodwill being the primary front on Wisteria. And then, noticing that the way the topography works, coming up Wisteria, you'll be seeing that corner of the Goodwill. So maybe there's some sort of an icon there, but then putting all of the parking and the services and everything else. So, and in those services, you could probably include drive-through, but putting all those in the back and putting them away from the streets so that the street frontages are maintained as kind of beautiful areas that support the retail and that encourage people to park behind, walk to the front, or walk in a secondary entrance from the back into the establishments, and then creating kind of a sense of place there. Waters Road has the ability, particularly with the new development that's been going on to the west, to be kind of a retail center for this area that's kind of in that new sort of paradigm of a walkable urban, urban meaning walkable and an attractive place. So that's what we've been trying to encourage. I think if there was a drive-through in the back corner, I think that would probably work. But hopefully it's not facing onto the streets, and I think you can probably make it work that way. So that's where we've been coming from, and that's why this diagram, I guess, is kind of showing. It's sort of another iteration of what we had been showing before.
Yep. Paul, thank you. Do I understand correctly that you have two buildings as you come in off Waters, two buildings along Waters? I mean, does it matter whether it's one versus two? Is that just an example, or do you feel like it's got to be two there as opposed to one?
Nah, it could be one, but the issue was, again, trying, if you're going to have all the parking behind, trying to create some permeability, right, so that people can kind of go through between buildings or through a building to get to the fronts of the retail, and so we have a lot of examples of showing this. We're doing a project. We're reviewing a project right now on Connecticut Avenue in Kensington. That is trying to show something like that that just allows pedestrians to come from their cars through the retail and just more exposure to frontages. So if it's a longer bar, and the other thing is we're trying to create more of a formal entry off of Waters Road, I think is what we're also trying to show, so that it's tightened up a little bit, that it's tree lined, it's an inviting type of entry into kind of the quality center that you're creating. And so by doing that, it maybe perhaps allows a building to either get bigger or you break it up. It doesn't really matter, but I think the important part here is to try to create a wonderful entry and also to create a frontage on Waters Road.
Okay, we need to wrap this up because we're over time. Are there any last minute comments or questions?
Just a final comment that we have gone through all the comments. There are a bunch of cleanup items that we'll address. We think some of the other things that we didn't discuss today, we can work through. I think we touched on the major things. Again, appreciate the willingness to help us move this along promptly. We'll follow up on what we discussed this morning. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
For Burtonsville Crossing Shopping Center. I am Christina Sorrento, and I'm the chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division. Your lead reviewer is Ryan Sigworth, and I guess Jeff Serber as well. The purpose of this meeting is really for the applicant to ask any questions you might have based upon the comments you received. I'll ask Ryan and Jeff to go over some of the bigger items we should discuss, and then really turn it over to you. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed.
Thanks, Christina. I don't think there's a lot of huge issues. There's some questions and concerns from the design team and the master plan team about the rear face of the existing buildings, since we kind of expect the property in the back to redevelop and what that's going to look like. I know that's maybe not technically part of this site plan, but it's still a concern. Had a couple of different pathways and some questions. And I think the biggest issue is just how that centralized open space where you're going to knock out part of the building is going to be designed. And I think DOT has some requests as well. But that's about it. There's not a lot, really. I mean, you looked at the comments, there wasn't a great deal.
Well, and you read them pretty much in order of what we had. Because we had a meeting yesterday and identified what we talk about. That's it. You've been reading off this
channeling. And I had a question, what you were doing with that covered breezeway between building D and between building D and the main building? Because there's a covered bank drive-through or something there now?
Are you
taking that out? I saw there's outdoor seating there, but are you going to take that out, or what do you?
No, and maybe we need to clarify. The intent was to keep that covered area for now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're going to make it outdoor seating. You should just keep that and reface it and make it look,
Yeah, so it may just be that, in the file, we just need to make that
create the red line.
Show it dashed lines or something and call it out to remain.
Yeah, or just, it was just tough to tell what your plan was there. And then I had this part of the site here is very confusing. And I think I drew in E-plans. What I'd suggest is you have this pedestrian route that just kind of ends right here. Maybe it's just an oversight in the drawing.
Yeah, no, that's
no way to get into and you're going to go right past the dumpsters. So I was thinking.
Well, actually, that's what that's intended for. That's sort of a back service alley. It's only 3 foot wide. It's just so that if they come out of the back, we sort of have a screen wall at the back door and some of the utilities.
Okay.
We just wanted a safe way for someone to walk trash over versus walking in the drive aisle.
Okay.
So that's a trash enclosure, which we've sort of made a little bigger because these other older out parcels have small trash enclosures and they're keeping one of them out. So that way they can move it in there.
I see.
And it really gets shared.
My comments were intended
to link them. We'll study linking to the north of this, whether we can actually get a link over to the Burger King or not.
Okay.
From a grading standpoint.
Yeah.
But I think that's all this intent was for trash.
I see.
That's why it's so narrow. It's not
Well, it wasn't dimensioned at least on this sheet.
Yeah.
So I didn't. But now that you mentioned that, it does look narrower than.
Yeah, I think we just typically do 3 foot wide, so someone can either have a little rolling trash bin or they can walk through there. And
okay, which is why there's no
correct
ramp. It's because you're just going into this space.
Yeah, and that's what we call a chicane. So we find people don't leave the doors open. So there's just sort of an opening that someone can walk through.
Okay.
The doors aren't open until the trash person comes, they open them up.
Okay.
So that's where that's leading.
Your narrative makes more sense than the 2-dimensional plan did.
Yeah, no.
At the out.
We'll clarify. We'll just add
start sending audios and
clarify.
Here's what we're thinking.
Okay. There were some comments about just showing vehicles there to make sure you meet your queuing space. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Jeff, you want to talk about the open space? I think that's probably the biggest issue that needs to be discussed.
Yeah, I mean, do you want us to talk really quickly about the back of the building?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that's
and Ryan can speak. So we've got a couple different new faces here. As our company, we actually now have properties on the West Coast and some projects in Denver. And so Jessica Max actually joined, and she has a similar role to me. Ryan Laurie's actually been with the company before.
Still know Ryan.
But they know Ryan, but works with Ryan. But his background is architecture, so he's sort of involved in a lot of, even though he's on our development side. We're trying to do something similar to what we did at the back of Cabin John. I mean, it is going to remain the back because that's where the back entrances are. But I think the intent is to carry, especially where we have this plaza area and some of the corners, pull some treatment around. We're also looking at doing some murals, adding some canopies to try to make it feel a little better, but everyone needs to realize for this phase, at least it's gonna be the back. I mean, that's where the service drive is. We're, enclosing any of the trash that's back there. Some of it right now is not enclosed. So we're gonna try to dress it up as much as we can. And, we would be more than willing to share. As you said, that's not really part of the application, but we can share what our vision is.
Yeah, because you're going to do kind of what you did at Cabin John, where you reface the buildings kind of before the site plan or.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll share that information with you.
I figured as much. You guys have experience with Cabin John Village.
However, the Cabin John, this is Paul Mortensen. The Cabin John development was predicated on breaking through the very long mall with a new street in order to connect one part of future development to the existing front of the mall. And I think that same idea needs to be something that if not created right now, can be realized in the future, or that it isn't precluded by not allowing something to kind of go through that possibly links the private drive B to private drive E. Because even if it's going to be a back for a while, and even if this mall is going to basically continue to function with a sprucing up the way it does, has in the past, with the transit center and everything else that's coming to the east, I think there needs to be some means of providing that connection into the future. And so I think that's going to be very important. And I think that has a lot to do with the comments that we had made with this private space. Streets, in our opinion, I think are can be wonderful public spaces. And I know that you guys have done wonderful public spaces, quote unquote, streets, with many of the other developments that you've done. And so that's kind of our biggest concern, at least for this space.
Yeah, we were going to discuss that, Paul. We just hadn't gotten to it.
Great. Sure. And if you want to zoom out a little, because I think we envision whatever development happens over there, we're hoping by doing this, we're forcing the direction of that. Mm-hmm. But what happened is when they created these new bus drop-offs there, they're right across from this. So you don't want really, and that's why our sidewalk connection is way off to the side, because those are two bus bays. So we certainly don't want people crossing in between buses or to have traffic pushing out into this bus drop-off area. So I think our intent is we can create a place now. Hopefully this all redevelops and becomes a grand center and can be lined up with the street that eventually can pull through. I know someone talked about Bethesda Row, which really that section, because our office actually used to be there and we used to eat there all the time. But that really is just a pedestrian area. But I think, again, this we view as sort of we want to create a space now that's very useful and, the community can use, but it allows us to also eventually, when something happens, to continue that through, potentially either by redefining that space or punching the road through, depending on what that development is. It's just hard to know until we know exactly what's going to happen over there.
Well, and I think more fundamentally, I mean, it lines up in the right of way is there. Right. So we were a little confused by the emphasis on those comments because that's where the space is and it could be converted in the future. So
yeah, we wanted to get it out there now, so it's a surprise later. Yeah. Yes, we're very much going to be focused on that adjacent development as well, and be steering towards the fact that this will all line up and make a complete thought. And we know that you're taking the first step like you're describing. So it's really for the grand future that we don't want to surprise you later.
Sure.
Should this happen sooner rather than later, and we're having this conversation again, you say, wait, you never said you wanted a street here. So it's
right.
Totally understand that Bethesda Row is like pedestrian only, but the idea is that this could be a road connection, setting it up now so that it could be that. And absolutely in the interim, like you're describing, you know, design the space that it's sort of public space and movies and concerts and whatever you like to do. That's fine.
Exactly. And so, I mean, we have provided a pedestrian connection to those people that do want to do it. Again, it's somewhat awkward because it's shifted, but because of the way the bus bays are, we really can't go straight. So I think we feel we've done as best we can, I guess, given what's on that. And we don't control, obviously, that area over there.
But for instance, one of the questions that we would have at this stage is, for instance, do you have the width necessary for a street to go through in the future?
Yes.
That's the type of thing that we would be looking at this stage.
Sure.
Obviously, we're not going to ask you to build the road, but certain key aspects like the dimension, is it there? I don't know if you want to go as far as say the subgrade.
It is, right?
Do you have the subgrade that you need later? I don't know if you want to go that far. But those are the type of things that at this stage, maybe you can think ahead and see, okay, how can we be as proactive as possible so that we don't have to, tear down the building in the future or tear down things that we don't need to. That's all.
Yeah, the width is there, Sandra. As far as the subgrade, I think, the approach that my experience with these is they'll do what they need to do at the time that they need to do it. So if we're going to put a road in, we'll deal with that subgrade.
That's fine.
Right? So.
And, I have a comment in the markups, just on the plans as submitted, to get rid of those 3 parking spaces at the head of that. Where the road would be. It's just odd having 3 parking spaces kind of.
Yeah, our thought were those were sort of pickup spaces. They're sort of a good, like if they're restaurants, that's really why those were there.
I know we talked about this at the meeting we had too, so.
Yeah, Ryan, our thought with those, and we pulled one out and put in some bike parking there on the left side, but our thought with those is it sort of unlocks some merchandising potential for the space there. It'd be great to have like a coffee or juice or breakfast user on one side of the plaza there, say the right side, and having a few spaces there for grab and go, quick serve parking kind of makes that appealing to a user like that. And it'd be even nicer to have an entry to that space on that back corner and start to animate and activate the back portion of that plaza area. So you get users from the park and ride, the BRT there, and can slip right in there and grab their cup of coffee, or also kind of park quickly and pull out. Our thoughts on the plaza design there are to buffer that. So we have a low wall in front of it, a landscape area, a tree proposed there. So the idea is you're not getting headlights shining through there at night if people are pulling in and out. But it sort of unlocks a bit of a merchandising potential to have those there.
But that's really the back of the building. I mean, so the only people that are going to park there are the workers or somebody.
Well, we were just told they don't want it to be the back. I mean, you want it to be activated. So I think their point is if you can put an active user in there, and that.
It would just be like 15-minute parking. So the employees shouldn't park there. It should be just for someone that maybe is leaving, come into the park and ride. They jump in their car, they come over, they park, they pick something up and they go was the thought. I mean,
the tenants are.
I mean, certainly, I think if the county feels strongly about it, we can reconsider it. But that was what we had envisioned. I mean,
is there a way to do like parallel along our property line?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's just not enough. There is, I think, some parallel already. There's not, I mean, we looked at whether we could get more. The width just is not really that wide back there.
There may be.
I mean, I'm just eyeballing the car that you have on there, and I mean, it still looks like it may take some reconfiguration that we're not talking about or showing right now, but
there is some
that there would still be
that curb line, Patrick.
Right there's parallel. We got rid of parallel to do that sidewalk, but you can see behind it where there is some parallel.
Right here.
Yeah, those are parallels there. So there are some parallels.
Those are staying.
Yeah, those are staying. But we had to get rid of some to get that sidewalk connection over through there.
Right, and then the idea of employees parking there, I think that the retailers, I think, are gonna control that, right? They're gonna be directing their employees not to park there because the purpose is to get customers in and out of there. So.
Yeah, we usually create a program, depending on how tight the parking is. We'll sometimes put like a blue dot in the parking spots where employees can park and get the, the license plate number so we can control where employees park and stuff. So we're very involved in that.
We can talk about it internally and get back to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Personally, I think it's strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, it was like strangely of all the things, I think that might end up being one of the things we really feel strongly about. Is
Yeah, again, we're, we like it, but we understand there's a compromise too.
Appreciate that.
I know that MCDOT had a couple of things to discuss with you. If Rebecca or Deepak, I think I saw on the call, want to discuss your comments a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen those yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. So yeah.
Oh,
Deepak, are you on the call?
Yeah, this is not my project.
I see Brenda on the call too. Is it Brenda's project?
Oh wait, it's a site plan. It's nobody's
It's a site plan.
project.
Yeah.
It should be Sam's comments.
Yeah, I don't think there's.
Sam already issued approval. He basically said it's state frontage and then talked about discussing with transit for a bathroom facility.
Oh, okay.
Morning.
Hi, Sam.
Yes, good morning. Yeah, I guess Tim nailed it. We did issue an approval. The only thing we were asking for is for the applicant to have a conversation with DOT Transit to see the means of providing a facility for them. And I'm sure they're willing to work with you. So that's the only comment we have here.
I think there's a facility there now. I see the bus drivers when they get out occasionally, they disappear into a wood enclosure. So, yeah.
So, yeah, we obviously haven't had a chance to dig in that, but we'll look and see if there's a way we can accommodate that.
Yep. Thank you.
The only thing I would say about that, just going off of pre-DRC discussion, was that they were talking about having it on your property, and you should discuss that with DPS permitting if that's going to add square footage to your project.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. They would enforce that, but yeah, I'll let you follow up with the county on that. Just.
Sam, where are you thinking that goes? I mean, I think we, the planning department, would really like to understand where that's going. So we don't have to just resolve it all right now, but I think we want to hear where you envision that going on this property.
Right. We had a meeting with Transit last week to discuss this very issue, and the reality of it is we are willing to work with the applicant to provide this facility. I mean, whether that's the preference will be to provide it on the subject site plan, but if there is a mean to work it through the transit facility to the north, that's something that they're willing to discuss with you. So the answer to your question, Patrick, at this point is up for discussion.
Yeah. And I guess that was my next question. I think you just said it. I have to imagine as part of the redevelopment of the adjoining property, the housing project with the transit center, that it would be logical to have the bus drivers right there using a bathroom facility. That's also an option that we're exploring.
What are you talking about? Redevelopment of the park and ride lot?
Right.
The park, as far as I understand, is that planning went and asked DOT or DGS if they, talked about redevelopment. I'm not aware of any actual developer redeveloping the park and ride lot. And when we talked to Transit said they needed a park and ride lot. So as far as I understand it, it was just planning staff going to and talking about redeveloping the site. It was not any specific developer.
Can you guys correct
Sam,
me
is
if
that
I'm
what
wrong?
you
I thought
heard
there was
too?
a big press release with a county executive talking about redevelopment of the adjoining property, and you're doing the face. I mean, am I misunderstanding?
Transit.
Yeah,
I'm
at
not
one
aware of
time, Edens was looking at doing that. That's many, many years ago.
Oh, no, I'm not saying you.
Oh, okay.
Like, there was a recent.
More
like,
recently, there's an RFP.
County executive on site talking about the plans for the adjoining property. I thought this was very public and nothing secret. Like, it's not Eden's leading the charge. I think the county is developing the adjoining, or at least putting out an RFP to redevelop that property with the transit center. And in addition, look what Eden's is doing on their site, which will tie in to all of this. So planning wasn't just out there doing things. I think your county executive, our county executive, was just having a press release like a month or two ago about all this.
Well, I'm not, Sam, did you get the same perception, the same thought as I did? Is it like
I'll
it wasn't?
reread the press release. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I
Well,
thought that's
I don't
what they
necessarily
were
know the
cutting.
press release was.
This is a tool. 1 second. I just put something in the chat that has a link to that RFP that was issued in 2021, October 2021.
I can probably share this if you like.
Yeah, we can revisit that. I guess my
Right.
apologies if my assumptions are incorrect. I thought that there was, some plans to move forward with on the adjoining property, and that would also be an option for the location of the bathroom facility. So
Understood.
if not on this site, and we can't figure something else.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Just to piggyback on what Patrick said, I think at this point in time, Transit is ready to discuss it with you, and they're willing to work with you to get this thing materialized. So this is our request for the applicant to do that.
I'm gonna make sure you have enough time because we're going
Right.
over.
That was a little bit of a detour. So
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I mean, we need to know about that too. So just quickly, we did have questions on the traffic. Both of these things kind of go in together, the traffic comments and really the lack of comments. Some, it said incomplete, and you may or may not know we were stuck in intake forever. And then when we finally got taken in, we were put off like another month. So timing is important. I don't know if you've gotten any comments from the community, because this is one of those, if you don't get comments within a certain period. So our hope is that we can get the rest of the comments, do one resubmittal, and then
I've got no emails, no phone calls, no nothing.
Okay.
We don't need to go to the board.
Right. So if we don't get anything, we don't need to go to the board, right?
How was that determined?
Because
I
we
don't
were
remember.
under the old zoning ordinance with this one.
Was this submitted as a director level amendment? Is that what you're saying? Because I don't recall that.
Our understanding was that that there was the option that if there was opposition received within the 15 days, that we would have to go to the board. But if there wasn't, that it would be at director's level.
I'm checking the checklist.
I have to double check because at one point we had consent item agendas. Now we no longer have consent
It's not
items. Was this maybe the
I
checklist?
think it was, Drew.
I'll
It's
look
been
at
it's been
it.
a while.
I'll
But
look at it.
and our notice, we recheck that when we before we sent the notice, because the notice says 15 days or there won't be a public hearing.
Checklist is marked as a major amendment.
You want to share the checklist on the screen?
So I got to go back through the history because it's been so long now.
I mean, since we are proposing 2 pad sites, I find it hard to believe that we checked. There we go. I find it hard to believe that we discussed this as a director amendment. We typically don't. My question was, I guess my doubt was if we had discussed this as a consent item, which we might have since this was so long ago, but we no longer have consent items. So it would be a public hearing that you'd have to present to the board. And
you don't bring anything with consent.
No.
You can thank Al Carr for
the most inefficient thing.
The former consent items, we still have a public hearing. If there's no community opposition, the board may choose to not have a presentation. So it, all in all, is like 2 minutes.
Right.
But it's up to the board's discretion. It's still advertised as a public hearing. It's still listed as a public hearing. It might be very abbreviated, like 5 minutes.
Okay.
It's kind of
But
like
they all-
extension requests or public hearings now, but there's, unless someone signs
Well,
up.
those are.
We felt, I mean,
It's
we felt they
similar.
were all, like, everything that occurred within the public hearing was a public hearing, but there was a lot of debate as to whether or not they were or not. So we've just, out of abundance of transparency, it's all a public hearing. We will literally hold
Right.
30 seconds if that's all it takes, and we'll march through the
And
items.
then I'm not going to convince you to change that. I'm
Yeah,
not asking
no,
you
it's-
to. My point is timing. You know, whether we need, given the comments we've received, and again, I don't know what's outstanding. I think like Paul was listed as outstanding, and maybe he has some, maybe he doesn't, but we wanted to make sure we got the remainder of the comments. And then
Yes.
I think we can hit all these in one resubmittal and then move forward. That's all I'm saying, is that timing is an issue.
I would love it if you could, do it in one resubmittal.
Yeah, I think
Anything from
we're
the
on
state
board.
yet? Because the state's review is incomplete, and obviously we've got frontage along Old Columbia Pike, so.
We were worried about traffic. We don't feel like we understand that LATR was just circulated last week. And so we're worried that we're going to get stuck on traffic issues. And what we did receive for this DRC on traffic seemed incomplete. And we have a number of questions about it that we can handle offline, but there's references.
You're worried
Some
about the,
seem to be statements instead of comments, and it references 198, which we don't even abut. So we're just trying to.
you're worried about the traffic study you do at SHA primarily?
Well, and yeah, just
Well,
and from staff.
Right, and what did Brett have any comments? His are marked as incomplete?
Do you know where we are on that?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, Rebecca, you look like you.
Well, DOT
Yeah, I was
shouldn't
gonna
have
say,
any
what-
comment.
I was just gonna look and see if it would make sure it was circulated, because it's site plan. So
Yeah.
to be honest, the traffic studies traffic studies are generally on a different timeframe. They don't necessarily follow the DRC, so we get 30 days to review it for DOT, and I think it takes 45 for the state to review things.
So
So
we'd
you had a
initiated
change, so I assume you actually submitted a traffic study. And just because I can't remember doesn't mean I didn't receive it.
No, we did. I mean, we were asked to, even though we were not generating any new square footage, but we did the traffic study.
Yes, you did the
It's-
scope, you did the study.
Yeah.
You had the scope approved, you submitted your study with the plan, and then now you're waiting for.
And this
so-
was a while ago. So we're just, again, we just don't want to get tripped up on that because it really
Yeah.
shouldn't be much of an issue.
When I think the study was required because you're adding 2 fast food
The drive-throughs.
sites and
I
drive-throughs.
can see
So
that. Yeah, the use.
it's not an increase in square footage, but it's an increase in use and thus a change in trip gen.
Yes, it is.
So what's the name of the project? Just so I can try and see if I got it.
Burtonsville
Shopping.
Roll that for now, just to see that.
Burtonsville.
Park?
I think it's shopping center.
Yeah.
It's called shopping.
When did you send it in? It should be in DRC, right? Or DAIC?
Our understanding, we were formally accepted at the beginning of August. And then, but we heard that it was not circulated until last week.
And the state, we had initiated a review with the state earlier, fearing this a little bit, but now seeing that the comments still aren't here.
But
a little
again,
trouble.
if it was distributed, we get, generally DOT takes 30 days to review, and the state takes 45 days for their first review and every subsequent review, I think.
Rebecca, I understand that it's been more than 30 days, I think, for staff, and the state has had it certainly more than 45 days in terms of the other outreach that we've done kind of independent of this process, because we didn't want to run into this issue. So
The document is in supporting documents in E-plans. DAIC,
So,
I don't know, but it isn't.
I will say, sorry to interrupt. I will say I have not seen the traffic study I have not received it by email.
But and I don't think that you necessarily should have, Rebecca. It's a site plan, and I don't know if it would have been submitted to you. I think it would have been reviewed internally here at Park and Planning by transportation staff and by the state. I don't know that necessarily that it was a requirement for DOT to review it. I may be wrong about that, but I thought DOT did all that at prelim plan, and we're beyond that.
No, if you do a traffic study at any point in time, we should be reviewing
You
it.
still get it? Well, then
Yes,
it's
so
in there,
did,
so.
and I know you probably didn't pay the fee, but so
No.
did you get a scoping form approved and signed?
We have Nick on here, don't we?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Nick.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Yeah, Nick Driven with Lenhart Traffic. Going back, we did coordinate with Chris on the scoping back in, I want to say early May, and he at that time told us that a full traffic impact study was required as opposed to a traffic statement. You know, I'm kind of trying to track back through as far as dates, but it looks like May was when we were having conversations about the scope. We finalized the study in June, and then that would have been uploaded, I think, to the system by Tim. So I'm not 100% certain what the date is, but what I do know, you know, is that we've had a study done for months here. Presumably, it was uploaded at some point, you know, in August or before, depending on when the rest of the information was uploaded. And I heard from Kwesi Woodruff at SHA last week that they just received it last week, which means, you know, wherever it was sitting somewhere in somebody's, you know, inbox or portal, you know, for at least a month, if not several months.
Like I said, we always get the scoping, everything is sent via email. And so DOT technically isn't part of the site plan. That's DPS review. I'm not seeing it. So I will take a look at the scoping and everything that's in the e-plans, and then I will send it out. We haven't received a payment for review though. So I'm not exactly sure. And if, you know, we don't receive the payment, then we can't review it. We generally review everything because we do maintain traffic signals.
Okay,
in the county, they're on state roads.
Rebecca, we have to jump to the other meeting because it's already started. Okay. We're not there.
We will get in touch with exactly where we're at, what we need from you on either Leslie's scope or EIS comments, where we're at. We'll get a status of.
Okay, yeah, the
Nick, I'll
study's done. I
send you
think
an
the
email.
scope's done and the study's done.
Yeah.
We just need
Thank you,
comments on
Rebecca.
that. All right, thank you. Sorry to run you over.
Thanks.
I'm Christina Sorrento. I'm the chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division, and this is the DRC meeting for the Tregoning property. Your lead reviewer is Jeff Server. The purpose of this meeting is for the applicant to ask any questions you might have based upon the comments you received. And first, I'm going to ask Jeff to kind of highlight any of the major issues. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. So Jeff, go right ahead and take it away.
Great. Thank you, Christina. Good morning, everyone. This is Jeff Server. The issues with this application are pretty much the ones that are outlined, being that this is a pre-preliminary plan. Really, the discussion does focus on the three issues that were identified in the statement of justification. So the connection, the connection for Hoffman Drive at this location here. In this pre-preliminary plan, it's being shown as a path connection. We're still really insisting on that being a formalized street connection, which we can discuss in more detail. The second point being the connection to the regional park that is adjacent to the subject property. And so we'll certainly discuss that in more detail. And then lastly, it's noted the location of the MPDUs, but there's sort of a greater discussion to be had, which is sort of the arrangement and configuration of some of the other units as well. So with that, I'm happy to turn it back to any questions or comments or feedback from the comments that were provided.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Kate Cubitt. I'm with the applicant. And we do have a couple questions, unless somebody else has any sort of clarification they'd like to provide.
No, go right ahead, Kate.
Okay, great. Thank you. First question is for Doug on his comment with respect to the forest conservation.
Yes, Kate, this is Doug.
Thanks, Doug. The comment is that we're required to provide 7.52 acres of on-site reforestation and afforestation and conservation. Question I have is there ever, we think we can meet this between the two parcels. We're going to look into that. The question that we do have is, are there any examples of exemptions that are ever allowed in this type of situation?
You mean forest conservation exemptions?
Or any sort, I know that there's a variance process, but is there a variance that can be granted? And if so, is there an example of you can provide of such a variance?
Well, Kate, what type of variance are you requesting, and from which section of the law are you asking for a variance?
Well, with previous projects, and maybe Bob can get into specifics in terms of the ordinance. I'm not exactly sure at this point, but on previous projects, for example, we've had variances to do like purchase off-site forest and things of that nature, off-site credits.
I think this is a terminology thing where it's not a variance.
Okay.
It's not even a waiver. You can take in this case, you won't need to take your reforestation or afforestation off-site at all. You just take it to the other parcel. Okay. Now, you will have to ensure that the existing forest on this parcel in question remains intact, because that's one of the requirements under 22A12. I think it's G or H, that you have to, you cannot remove forest, and then you also have to plant up to, in this particular case, the afforestation threshold, because you're using an optional method of development.
Doug, Bob here. I think you're drilling down to what Kate was asking. We believe that for various reasons, some of the on-site forest has to be impacted. Even for this path, I think, to Hoffman that we're proposing. And so what we're trying to figure out, and I confess I'm not an expert on the forest conservation requirements, but are there ways in which we can clear and then plant at an appropriate ratio somewhere else on the project to compensate for that?
Well, to be able to clear, you have to demonstrate that you, I forget the exact legal terminology, but in the parlance is you've been backed into a corner by other governmental concerns. And in that case, the section of the law you're referring to is 22A12, I think it's G, paragraph 3. But that has only been used in the past when, for example, DOT or fire and rescue has certain requirements have to be met on the development, and that requirement involves removal of some forest. But we don't, historically, we have never allowed just a development to remove forest and claim that that type of waiver.
Okay, well, we'll have to look into that because you know, we're, as with many projects, we're fighting a lot of different objectives here simultaneously. And while forest retention and preservation certainly is important, so too is housing and connectivity, et cetera. So we'll set up something to follow up with you on that, I think. Kate, does that cover it?
Covers it for me.
Okay,
Anyone else?
unfortunately, Bob, you know how to get hold of me.
Yeah, thanks, Doug.
Doug, thank you for that answer.
Oh, you're welcome,
And then,
Kate.
thank you. The other question that we had was for Mr. Samarajan.
Yes, Kate, I'm here.
Great. So the question or the clarification that we wanted to get from you is, at this point in the juncture, being that this is a preliminary plan, our thought is that we will not be providing profiles and cross sections of the public streets, but we will be providing them with future plans.
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Is there anybody else, CPJ or Bob or John, that has any other questions that you'd like to ask at this point?
Kate. Sorry. Kate, I have a question related to the last comment that you brought up, road cross sections and profiles.
Yeah.
It's part of one of the questions that you asked for this pre-preliminary plan application is this Hoffman Drive connection through the property. And I believe that our team had requested the road profiles and cross sections for that road in order for us to see where, you know, how the best alignment possible, where it can connect to the proposed road network that you're showing. So I think that you need to prepare those at a minimum for this Hoffman Drive connection, either to make your case either way, either that you don't need the connection or that yes, the connection can be made. So can you elaborate a little bit on that? Were you planning to have that provided?
It's my understanding, Sandra, for Hoffman we were, but for the rest of the streets internal to the job, we were not at this point.
Okay. I think that works.
Sandra, we understand that there has to be a lot more discussion on the Hoffman Drive connection, and you need engineering information to do that. That's going to be one of the various follow-up meetings that we're going to be looking to set up with you and your team.
Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying that point.
Sure.
I just want to jump in really quick about the forest conservation question. Again, I'm looking, I think what you want to look at is 22A12D2. And that'll give you the situation where afforestation doesn't need to be done to the amount in the table, you know, if you meet certain requirements.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for pointing that out, Christina.
Yeah, thank you, Christina.
So we have a relatively short period of time here today, so we did not think it would be efficient to delve into the three substantive issues that Jeff mentioned. We understand, I think, what you're suggesting, and I know you know that we have some concerns about at least the Hoffman connection and the connection to Damascus Park. The MPDUs looks like that might be an easier issue, but we need to look into that and aren't prepared to discuss that today. But we would like to follow up with one or more discussions with you folks on those three key issues.
Okay, thanks, Bob. When you're ready, just please reach out to me and I'll get those scheduled on our respective calendars.
Okay, so you'll be the point person, Jeff, to set up?
Yeah, as the lead reviewer, I'll be the point person. So please reach out to me and I'll coordinate.
I appreciate that.
One question that did come up in review was in looking at the master plan, and our master plan reviewer, Jamie Pratt, is on the call right now. There's a question though regarding, you know, whether this property was actually designated for sewer service within the master plan. And Jamie, feel free to jump in if you want to elaborate a little bit more, but it was just something that we were seeking a little bit more information on.
Yeah, the
the master plan does not show this property as one of the areas designated for sewer service. And the optional method is only available if the master plan has designated the property for sewer service. So I know that somehow there was a category change, and maybe when that happened, this issue was already settled. But I just wanted to bring it up because of my straight reading of the line of the zoning ordinance is that you can only use MPDU optional method if the master plan has designated the site for sewer service, and the map and the master plan does not. So just wanted to bring it up as a concern. And I apologize, I didn't make comments last week because I was out of the office for the last 2 weeks on vacation. And I have one more question that's not quite related to this, but the density calculation, it looks like somebody rounded up instead of down. So I just want to make sure somebody redoes the calculation to make sure that you're not squeezing one extra unit. It's not a big deal, but it looked like it was slightly over the density. So I wanted somebody to check that again. But the
Okay,
sewer
we can
question was
We
the
can
bigger
check
question.
that. I actually thought it was below, but I'm not the mathematician on this, so I'll get with the engineers and
Yeah, just
and
check
the
it.
property owner had handled the water and sewer issues before my involvement, so I'll talk with them and get some of the background on that as well.
Yeah, I could share the screenshot showing the master plan sewer map if you think that would be helpful at this time, but you can look in it later.
This is George Zelos from DEP. The category change was approved conditionally and conditioned on a planning board approval of a preliminary plan that either uses a cluster or MPDU option.
Right, but the zoning ordinance text states that it has to be designated in the master plan for sewer service, and I wasn't sure if there was some wiggle room in the master plan that indicates that designation.
Right, but not
just-
to, yeah, I heard what you said, Jamie, but just want to, George, you said the conditional approval on the water sewer category change itself was that optional method would be allowed, but that it would be cluster or, I didn't hear what you said.
Cluster or an MPDU development option.
Got it. And so the applicant's saying per the category change request, we're utilizing the MPDU optional method development, correct, Kate?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
And I will reach out to the property owner. It's my understanding and that the property owner was, and I wasn't around when the master plan was written, but it's my understanding that they were involved in that process and worked closely with planning staff at that time on the master plan to make sure that this was zoned appropriately. So I'll reach out to the property owner and get more information on that.
All right, yeah, we'll appreciate the comment, Jamie. I think we'll talk internally. Just on the surface, it sounds like the appropriate process has been followed, and so understand what it says in the master plan, but it sounds like the actions after that in the water and sewer category changes, in effect, would amend, without a full opening and amending the master plan, but I think the intent was clearly to provide a path forward, and in effect amends that one line in the master plan, but we'll talk internally and confirm that, Kate.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you,
Yeah,
Patrick.
we'll look into that too and share any information. So I guess we'll follow up post meeting here with Jeff to set up any follow-up discussions.
That sounds great. Thanks, Bob. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
All right,
Thanks, folks.
thank you.
Bye.
DRC meeting for Brickyard Estates. I am Christina Sorrento. I'm the chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division. And your lead reviewer for this item is Ryan Sigworth. The purpose of this meeting is for the applicant to ask any questions you might have based upon the comments you received. And I will ask Ryan to just highlight some of the major issues that we should talk about and then turn it over to the applicant. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks, Christina. I think the comments are all in E-plans as markups. I guess the main one I want to talk about, well, we'll probably talk about a few of them, but I spoke with the engineer. I'm not sure if he's on the call or not before they submitted this. And actually, I think he submitted, yeah, Mr. Horrigan.
Yes.
And I remember speaking with you, and thanks for submitting a concept plan rather than a pre-preliminary plan. I did notice that your lot sizes are like 1/100th, 2/100ths above the 2 acre minimum. So I just want to, it goes without saying, if at the time you actually survey this for platting and you fall below the 2 acre minimum, you won't be able to plat these lots. You are right on the razor thin edge here. So I guess I would suggest you have great confidence in the survey work you've done as you prepare these plans. I do want to note that the subdivision regulations require a 25-foot theoretical truncation at the corner of New London and Brickyard, and you only have 15, which I'll zoom in. Right here, this dimension doesn't meet what the code requires, although there is a mechanism. I've quoted the whole section in the markups to request a modification, but like as you can see, the truncation here is much bigger than the one that you're providing. That said, I think just that would get you up below the minimum lot size, so that's a problem if you don't get that modification. I do also see comments in here regarding, since New London would be the lower classification street, to put the shared driveway out to New London rather than Brickyard. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that makes sense. You'll probably see comments in there regarding the in-ground pool. I realize that these plans are just kind of illustrative, but the way these lots are oriented, lot 3 specifically, the front is on New London, and so that pool would be a side yard, and the zoning ordinance wouldn't allow that pool. It would allow a pool, you just have to reorient it to the rear yard down in this particular area, just to be advised about that. Doug, did you want to discuss, I think there is an old NRI and another new NRI needs to be done, if memory serves.
Correct. There was an old NRI from 2017 that has expired. So we're going to need if you move forward with this, we're going to need a new NRI FSD approved before any other development applications.
And Doug, you can correct me, but because these lots are right at 2 acres, the board does not typically want to accept easements on lots that small. So we won't be requiring or requesting any forest conservation easements on the property, just due to the lot size.
That is correct.
That's all I have. I mean, there's some more markups in there, but they're all fairly minimal. Did the applicant's team or the property, I think the property owner's on the line as well. Were there any other questions?
Yes, I have a number of questions about the comments. If we can dive into that,
yeah.
Whenever, but
go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, thanks everyone for taking the time and providing your feedback on this, and Brian for that introduction. So yes, this is threading the needle here. We did have it's a full boundary survey that was completed. So we are confident in those lines and the points they set. But nonetheless, it is very close, as you pointed out. So that's kind of the main things I want to talk about is the comments that are going to impact the total area of the proposed subdivision. So I did quickly adjust the truncation on the intersection there. we end up losing, I think, 188 square feet. And instead of having 0.04 extra acres, we have 0.004. So even closer, but as it stands, we're kind of right on that number.
Okay.
But it's still closer than we'd like to be going into this, and as Michael Taylor, who's the contract purchaser, would consider purchasing the property. So my two questions are, I think they came from County Transportation. It's comment 17, number 1 and 2. So they both kind of say the same thing. They talk about the classification of Brickyard in New London and what the required minimum right-of-way is going to be. So for Brickyard, they list it as a primary residential with a minimum right-of-way of 70 feet. And New London Drive, I think, secondary residential with a minimum right-of-way of 70 feet. So what we have on our plat is actually larger than that. We drew it at the absolute maximum right-of-way we thought that was possible. So Brickyard, we're showing dedicating, I think, 7 feet, which would give a width from the center line of 42 feet. So then that's kind of equivalent to a total right-of-way of 84 feet on our half, but it's currently 70 feet, and we're showing dedicating 7 more, so that we're providing kind of the 42 feet, and that's based on, I believe it's detail 2003.14, which is the cross section for primary residential, but it includes bike lanes, which I think are included on the master plan. So we'll take every foot we can get. So is it truly going to be the minimum right-of-way for Brickyard is going to be 70 feet? And that's what we should at a minimum expect to dedicate?
Isn't there is this Chris the lead reviewer on this? Is you? Okay. We may need to get back to you. Would the bicycle master plan have any improvements?
No, not on Brickyard.
Okay. So I don't believe there's any bike lanes required on Brickyard.
Correct.
And so I'd have to go back, and I haven't looked at the cross sections.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you proposing additional dedication than what is required? Maybe I missed that point. I apologize.
I think he's trying to make room for the bike lanes, but
wanted to be as conservative as I could up front before this meeting and before, if they decide to go through with the purchase. So I looked at the maximum possible right-of-way was 84 feet, but I think that's, if you have bike lanes and everything. So I put that to be safe, not necessarily because I think it's the right answer.
Got it.
So that's why I wanted to confirm, during this meeting, what it will be.
Okay. I'm just reading through DOT's comments here, it's a little hard to. So yeah, primary residential street, minimum right of way 70 feet. I don't know how that falls into their cross section, but the primary, I think that's going to be fine. I think 70, we may need to get back to you on that.
Okay.
Just to make sure, but I think what was it, 84 you had in there? I think that's going to be more than is needed. Just sort of the simple fact that the bicycle master plan doesn't have any improvements on Brickyard.
Right. Yeah, that takes out 10 feet right there. So.
This is Rebecca from DOT. Because it's a open section roadway, you have to look at the open section, which I think primary residential is at least 74 feet.
Yeah, you might be right, Rebecca. I'm just reading your comments from your staff.
So it's a primary residential.
That's what it says and it says
Open
P23
section.
with 2 lanes and a minimum right of way of 70 feet. That's the comments that you've provided.
Yeah. So if it's not, I think he's mistaken because it's not open section, or that's not including open section. So minimum right of way for open section roadway is 84 feet. That does include 5-foot bike lanes and sidewalks. Maybe. So is there bike facilities on this?
No,
there's no bike facilities.
So that's 10 feet. So it's 74. So, and then sidewalks would be 10 feet. So I think 70 might be okay, but it's an open road section.
Yeah, no, it's
then
definitely an open
shoulder.
road section. So Rebecca, why don't you and I and Brett get together and we'll make sure it's going to be a right of way less than 84 feet.
Yeah, I mean, I
Well,
would say it's 70, so.
Yeah, so I think it's probably going to be 70 or 74.
Yeah.
One or the other.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention
Maybe
that,
either one
Patrick, you may want to grade it and make sure that really fits within the right of way, as Rebecca mentioned. Because it's open section roadway, it has a swale on either side, and we have specific requirements for swales for open sections. So you may want to do some looking into to see if that fits or not.
Right, okay. Yeah, I see the swale. It says 4-to-1 slopes, 20 feet wide from the edge to the sidewalk there. What the section looks like. So, okay, I'll consider that.
Yeah, you have the standard section, 2003.14.
Yes.
Okay.
And Rebecca, I noticed on New London Drive also is an open section road, and Brenda's comment noted as a secondary, but I know that a secondary open section residential is a 74-foot right of way, but it looks like she's saying 70 feet.
Yeah, I think that was missed, unfortunately.
Okay.
It's we just missed that. If it's open section, we have to look at the wider. It's 2002.04.
Yeah, well, and to give Patrick some credit here, he is showing enough right of way to accommodate the 74-foot section.
Actually, it's 78. What's the difference? 2002.04.
Yeah, so that section shows 78, but there might be something I don't know about it. But
So there's tertiary. Tertiary is 74 feet. So is it a tertiary roadway or is it secondary?
Yeah, Brenda's comments classified as a secondary.
Yeah, Rebecca, the existing one, I believe, is a secondary on New London, the part that's already built.
Okay. So then it's 2002.04.
Yep, that's what's referenced.
In this case, there's sidewalk on one side of the street, so I don't know exactly, if you want to reduce it or not. It would still be, it'd be half of 78 anyway.
Okay. Okay, so, all right, so New London Drive is going to be 78 then, total right away. We're showing a dedication from the center line of 30, equivalent to 39 feet. So one thing I want to understand is when we dedicate a right away, do we need to dedicate it to the full width or our half from the center line?
Just your half from the center line.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so then what we're showing for New London Drive is correct, the 39 feet. And then for Brickyard, we were showing 84, but it likely is going to come down to 74.
Yes, I'll get with everyone and send you a separate email to nail that down for sure.
The main point for both of those streets is to do the swale and make sure you have enough room. You don't want to be following off the edge of the road into the swale. So those are probably the main things.
Okay, so, all right, so when you're talking about grading there, does that impact the total right of way then? If additional right of way is required, based on the maximum slope of that swale, to fit it in there, is that what that comment would be? Or that's all it would be?
I believe so.
Okay. Okay, very good. All right, kind of on that note, later in that comment, it says complete streets. It says, the standards are going to change and we might have to design to complete streets. I'm not really familiar with that term, so I just wanted to kind of quickly cover what that is, so I'm not missing something.
Rebecca, you want to cover that or?
Yeah, it's just a standard comment that we have. Generally, you should be okay without. It's just a standard comment. If you come in later at a date, you're at a concept. If complete streets is adopted, which is our new context-sensitive road design standards, then you would have to comply with that.
Gotcha. And does that impact right away with, or just how the section's designed, or is there a way to view, I guess, what that impact would be?
I think it's on the planning website, complete streets. If you Google it, there should be a document on there.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think we have like 5 more minutes. So my other major concern about this is the basically stormwater outfall and capacity of the existing system. So hopefully someone is on who can help me with this. There is a 24-inch RCP pipe in the bottom left of the plan in lot 1. We did a preliminary analysis of that based on the 10-year 24-hour storm and kind of an estimate of what impervious area is going to be. It is right at flowing full, so it could, depending on the final conditions and everything, I could see it not having capacity. So there's a concern around that as to would we be required to upgrade the system to a 27-inch pipe? How far down would we have to upgrade it? General answers I know at this point because we don't have detailed information. I presume it would be to the next pipe that is 27 inches or larger. And if we don't end up doing that, can we provide on-site detention through the use of kind of oversized bioretentions or permeable pavers or dry wells or something just to reduce the peak flow? Because that could have a significant cost impact.
Is that in the right of way, the pipe? I assume so.
It looks like it's on our property, so we might need a dedicated easement. It's zoom in bottom left there. You can kind of see a small end wall there.
I'll let DPS, stormwater, or DOT. If it's in the right of way, then the stormwater is DOT's purview. If it's on private property, then it's DPS, and I'll let them fight over who takes what.
Just to clarify, we're talking storm drain, not storm water. That's a different thing. But this is Mark Etheridge with Sediment Control Stormwater Management. We're going to look as part of the stormwater management approach to make sure that the receiving system is adequate to take the full developed 10-year flow. So if there's a requirement to upsize that pipe, that would be determined by the DOT. You can potentially do additional storage on site to reduce the 10-year flow, and we would probably allow you to oversize your ESD practices to accommodate that. The question is going to be, will DOT accept that as your mitigation to reduce the flow to that pipe? Traditionally, I don't think that they do that, so I'll leave that up to those guys. But yeah, you could do some overcompensation on site as far as we're concerned for stormwater management. But whether or not you have to upsize the pipe would be something that the other agencies would have to take a look at.
Yes, DOT, I think we generally don't accept stormwater management practices. You can do a quantity facility that's not ESD.
Yeah, it wouldn't work on something like this probably because you'd have to have a separate parcel and do an underground structure, and there probably isn't even enough storage or even enough vertical to tie into that receiving open storm drain system. So probably a structural detention practice would be relatively infeasible on a 3-lot subdivision. Okay. If you're willing to look at it, that's fine. If you can make it work, that's okay with us.
But it would have to be on a separate parcel, correct?
Yeah.
So the other question would be, how much are you increasing the flow to the pipe? And then you have to look at, if you're increasing the flow to one section, I think you have to go down 3 more sections and look at it. Yeah.
In terms of the analysis, the drainage study.
Yeah. But it's a question of how much are you increasing it to?
Well, okay, I don't have exact answers, but I think I do.
And I'm not I don't know if anybody else on my staff can answer any questions better than I did. Brenda?
Gotcha.
If you know.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll have to look at this more in the preliminary plan.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just did peak development. I didn't do pre-development comparison, actually. I was just looking at that. Okay, yeah, well, I was trying to get a budget number for Michael, something to work on, because I looked at the system and on the GIS system. It's 24 inches basically for another 850 feet, and then it converts to a 27-inch right before an outfall. So I had kind of said, well, in worst case, I would plan on at least upsizing that 850 feet. So is that a reasonable, I guess, worst case assumption, or am I being overly conservative with that?
This is a Teak bench here from DPS. The requirement is if the existing system is undersized, and then the requirement is that you have to upgrade the 3 next segments. So how far that is, that's irrelevant. So you have to upgrade. As far as the on-site retention, it depends on how much you are, the undersized it is. We are we're open to the idea of on-site retention. That's not a bad idea, but you need to look at it and determine how much the 10-year flow. If it's you're mitigating it, that's fine. Something we can look at. If you're not adding any water to the existing structure, you don't have to upgrade it.
Okay, so if the post-development flow is equal to less than the pre-development, even if it is at full capacity or over capacity, we would not need to upsize it.
That's right. If you're not contributing to the existing capacity, then you don't have to upgrade it.
And just following up on some of the stormwater, one of the other reviewers, I'm not sure that she had an opportunity to make comments, but it was noted that on lot 1 here, you kind of have this topo, this draw that runs through here with a lot of drainage. And so, and again, I realize even on a subdivision plan, these building footprints and locations are kind of, not set. But whether or not this location for this house is the best spot with this much, happening in terms of drainage through this property in this location, something to think about.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think we're considering getting rid of the shared driveway in lieu of direct connections, which would mitigate kind of the slope through there because we flattened it out for that road. But yeah, no, it's definitely the topo there is something that we worked on.
Okay.
And just one more thing, just for everybody's information, stormwater management facilities would not be considered for storm drain within the public right of way. If you are mitigating on site, that's a different issue. We'll consider that.
Okay, I don't know if I fully understood that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So what was the distinction between?
So if you're doing an on-site retention, that's a different issue. But if you're, let's say you have a stormwater management facilities within the public's right of way, then that's something we will not give you credit for it because that's subject to failure. And we want to make sure that our facilities, stormwater facilities, can accommodate. So in this situation, it really doesn't matter to us. If you're doing it on-site retention, we will give you, as far as we are concerned, we're okay with it. But whether Mark will accept it or not, that's a different issue.
Sure.
But as far as the right of way is concerned, we are okay with on-site retention.
Gotcha. Okay.
And just to follow up on something you said, Patrick. So if you're going to go with direct driveway connections for each lot, then I guess the reorienting the shared driveway out to New London is a moot point. I would say that you should try to take lots 3 and 2 out to New London, but obviously you have a corner lot there. So, if you decide to stick with a shared driveway and reorient it out to New London, you may look at wanting to reorient and sort of draw some of these lots, which would be fine. Obviously, you'll have to cut it up so the math all works. But yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think lot 3 likely will be reoriented to New London Drive. Not confirmed yet, though. But on that note, do I have time for another question about the fire access, or am I out of time?
So you can, but Marie LeBaugh, who handles those, is not here, but you can ask it very quickly. We are over time already. But if you want to ask it, go right ahead.
Okay, yeah, so as it's proposed, the last shared access point is 200 feet from Brickyard Road. We're already meeting the width requirements that she required for fire access. So my only question is, do we need to provide a turnaround in the form of a Y turnaround or a cul-de-sac with that 200-foot distance to the last shared point? So that's her.
I hate to speak for Marie, and I'll let her be the final arbiter, but I think her standard is 150 feet. So you're saying this point right here is 200 feet from Brickyard?
Correct.
I think, again, I don't want to speak for her, but I think you would have to get that below 150 for her to not require a turnaround.
Okay. Which I guess we could do then. Perfect. Okay.
It could be, I mean, it could be a cul-de-sac or it could be a T, a wing T.
And Patrick, I think the standards are also different if you have a shared driveway for 2 units versus 3 units.
No, it's 150 all the time. But again, if you're going to go with private drives for each individual lot, then that whole 150-foot turnaround thing, it doesn't apply. It only applies to shared driveways.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, perfect. Thank you, everyone, for all the insight and time and everything. Sorry for going over, but
no problem. I'll get back to you on the right of way with question just to nail that down in the next few days.
okay. Is it I'm sorry to pressure you, but is it possible to do it before the 15th? Because I think he has to close by then.
Yes, I can do it. I will do it before the 15th.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Christina Sorrento. I'm the chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division, and this is the DRC meeting for the Two Birds Daycare. Your lead reviewer is Grace Bogdan. The purpose of this meeting is for the applicant to ask any questions you have based upon the comments you received. I'll have Grace run over some of the bigger issues of this, and then we'll turn it over to the applicant. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Grace?
Thank you. So with concept plans, what we typically do is you've received the DRC comments, and then after the meeting today, I will be sending out a memo summarizing those comments again with next steps, how you can move forward if you choose to do so. And so in this case, I will start with some of the agency comments. I think in general, there are a lot more questions that we need to have answered to give you criteria as to what would be necessary as we move forward. So starting with fire, the division has questions in terms of what exactly is the change in use. Will the front door remain on East-West Highway? And that gives implications of exactly what they would be looking for in terms of fire access review as this project moves forward. For stormwater management, if disturbance is over 5,000 square feet, then a stormwater review would be required. I think with what you're showing on the screen, it would not, but as the design moves forward, that's something you want to keep in mind. And similarly with environment and forest conservation, exemption may be required depending on the criteria of the application as it moves forward. As you saw last week, Katie, my Career Air Transportation Planner, asked a follow-up email for more specifics on the size of the daycare and the kids. With response of 150 children at this daycare, this would likely require a transportation impact study, and that could be required either during the site plan amendment process, or if this moved forward a different way, it could be at an APF at building permit. And so in terms of the planning questions, I think we have a bit of concerns in terms of the layout in the rear where the daycare playground is proposed. I think we have some questions. I visited the site yesterday. It is a very tight space, and we're concerned with how the parking maneuvers would continue to occur adjacent to that play space. It does look as though there's dumpsters that are located there right now, and so we want to know logistically how would this space change? Would the trash move to a different area, or would those dumpsters be located adjacent to the play space? So we have a lot of questions as to whether this is the best location for an outdoor play space, and we want to know generally if the roof had been considered to, if that's structurally possible to put it on top of the roof and give that area a bit of a larger area, and then the circulation could be maintained as it is currently today in the back of the alley. And so as you move forward, if the play space can be moved to the roof, the way we see it, this could actually move forward without a site plan amendment and could be just a building permit application and our adequate public facilities test, and the transportation review could be reviewed at that time. But if you do choose to move forward and continue to have the play space at the rear, this would require a site plan amendment. And that site plan amendment would really, we have more questions about how this rear would continue to function. Will the drop-off area that's necessary for the daycare remain safe, adequate, and efficient? And so a lot of those questions you've seen in our change marks, and we'll continue to have those as we move forward. And so I'll turn it over to the applicant if you have any additional questions for us.
Hi, my name is Ivan. I'm the civil engineer, and I want to introduce the team. We got Sharon Bradley with the Bradley Site Design, Chris with Bradley Site Design, and then we got the people who are looking to lease out the property. I think JP is on the call, and so is
yes, JP and Samuel. Yep, I'm here.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and if you guys have any questions for the Development Review Committee, please present them.
I had one question regarding building on the roof. If it were possible to build some on the roof, but say some of the younger children who would not be mobile to go to the roof, would there be space to consider building in the parking lot for the non-mobile children?
I think that is something to consider, but we would still probably have similar concerns as to how the parking lot would function. and how you'd make that play space enjoyable for both the kids while still having the parking spaces adjacent to it and the trash, and just how all of this would coexist together.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Ivan, do you have any comments on, in terms of the parking available, provided now currently, versus what would be required to be retained, if in the event, we considered the roof, but the roof was not a viable option for whatever reason?
Right, we were looking at that, and as mentioned in the comments, 42 spaces are required based on the amount of square footage provided. Even though there's the metro station right across the street, or literally right just to the south of it, you had mentioned in the past they've allowed for a reduction in parking. How much parking reduction are we allowed for a project like this, I guess is the question.
I have a great question. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, no, I was just wondering basically what kind of parking reduction would the committee support?
Sure. So I think I'm trying to look in my comments what I specifically said to this effect. I'm Katie Mancarini. I did the transportation review. You and I have emailed a little bit about some of those things. So technically, you're located within the parking lot district, and that allows you to seek, you can provide fewer than the minimum required, which can be 0. However, given the nature of this use, we do encourage that there's some spaces designated for pickup and drop off. I mentioned in my comments a couple of other projects in similar settings, whether they're in Bethesda or Friendship Heights, showing kind of a ratio of how many students and then how many spaces. And so I think when I compared your site to the others, and assuming that all 8 of these spaces would indeed work for your pickup and drop off, that's right on the cusp of what we would be looking for. I think we'd be, if you were keeping 150 students, we'd be looking more for like 9 or 10 potentially. But to what Grace was saying earlier, what we're not sure about is if this parking space is also needed for loading, and in which case probably those 2 parallel parking spaces may not work for that use. And I think that, I'm trying to think if there was anything else specific about that. Oh, I wasn't sure if any of the other uses that are to remain in this area are depending on that parking as well. When daycares have been put into places where they have shared parking, they have identified these as spaces that are reserved during certain hours for pickup and drop off, so that that's available to your clients or your parents.
Just to follow up, and I think this has been brought up in the past about the ADA accessibility. We're going to be required at a minimum to provide a handicap and a access out on the property, or is that something that, because the parking garage is so close, if we're not required to provide an ADA accessible spot?
Yeah, I think I would recommend providing at least one. And I would make it, if you're asking just for my opinion, I would suggest doing a van accessible space with an adjacent aisle so that you're fully accessible to any sort of need for that. But the code isn't super clear when it comes to PLDs. If you do provide some parking, what is the amount that you need to provide for ADA? So we'd want to touch base with you and work with you on that.
Okay.
Hi, this is JP again from Two Birds. Thank you for clarifying some of the numbers on pickup drop off and what you've seen in the area. That's actually really helpful. One of the things we're negotiating with this landlord is that they also own some of the adjacent properties, including the parking garage. So what we're trying to fold in to these negotiations are how many spots that we would have at our disposal between certain hours for our members to use during pickup and drop off. And as I've seen in our experience, the more the merrier. That 10 is also a very sound number, so that's quite helpful. And again, just to reiterate that these parking spots would be located in the garage just south of the building.
Okay. I think that would probably be a better suit for this. When we've seen other projects, like for example, the United Therapeutics daycare or the 2 BMC daycare, they were also within a shared garage as long as they're marked and you have that whole thing worked out with your landlord. That might be a better fit. And then these spaces could be used for either loading or trash collection or something else.
Yeah, and then regarding the dumpsters that you mentioned a couple minutes ago, that the landlord is willing to consider accommodating our needs, that to move those out of this back alley area and into an adjacent building that's not part of this building's premise, but the building could use those dumpsters. So there's some flexibility in their logistics, given that they own so much of these surrounding properties that we're considering.
That's really interesting. Okay.
Just to follow up on that parking garage comment, will they be required to be marked spaces then in the parking garage, or how does that?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
what has worked for other similar uses is they'll be marked, and you can designate which like hours. So for example, I think the example that I gave you in Friendship Heights, they said that these spaces are going to be reserved, during a morning drop-off period and an evening drop-off period, Monday through Friday, recognizing that the rest of the retail users should be able to use those on the weekends because the daycare isn't in operation. So it will depend on how your daycare operates, but I think that we would be looking for that on your garage plans. And that's actually a good reminder that if you decide to use spaces in the garage, please do submit the plan showing where the parking pickup and drop off is, because another thing that we'll be looking for is the juxtaposition of those spaces to the entrance of the daycare, making sure that's safe and clear and all that kind of stuff.
All right, it's very clear. Thank you.
So you had mentioned if we keep the day or the playground area at the parking area, we're going to need a site plan amendment. Is there anything else we need to show on the site plan amendment? I guess, do we need you said a garage plan almost to show what the spaces would be taken up in the plan?
Yeah, and I'd be happy to share with you an example.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can share those with you. So it's just a simple garage plan showing how many total spaces, the dimensions of the spaces, and then which ones would be designated for the daycare. And then if you could also include kind of a markup of what that sign would look like so we could get a sense of what that is. And then also, just to make sure all the dots are connected, include that in your statement of justification as well so that everything matches up. And then we get a better understanding of what you're proposing.
Okay.
We will add this comment to the memo that goes out in case you didn't catch everything that Katie just said. I do. Yeah, that's right.
No worries. Thank you.
And then just one more comment to that effect. If you do move forward with the site plan amendment, you are going to be required to have another meeting with us prior to that submittal. And we would actually encourage you to have that as early on as possible, just so we can talk more about the design of the play area as this moves forward.
Do they have the amendment number or the latest plan number?
Yeah, and we gave you, we uploaded some documents that I was able to find on the microfiche for that original site plan that's in the uploads folder. I think I just uploaded the opinion, but we do have more documents. It was actually a very large microfiche file, and you are welcome to come to our building. It's located on the second floor, and I can give you the contact information in our memo to review the microfiche in full if you need that information for the site plan amendment.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I don't think there were any more questions from Bradley. Ivan, any other questions that we wanted to clarify?
No, I think it's pretty clear. Yeah, I think it's pretty clear on my end.
Right. Okay. So if people don't mind, just to recap, we need to take a look at the possibility of using the roof as a possible space. Evaluate that. But if that is not possible, then the site plan amendment route would be the way we would go. We have plenty of comments here that we would need to address as part of that. Is that generally the summary that I'm understanding?
Yes, that sounds like a good summary.
And regardless if we go put the playground on the roof or in the parking lot, we still need a traffic impact study, correct?
Yeah, so I'm happy. What I would do if I can send you, in addition to those garage plans and stuff, I'll also send you our information on how you estimate trip generation, all that kind of stuff. And I would recommend setting up a separate meeting with me once you're ready, and we can talk about what the implications are, whether you need a traffic study, and if you do, what the scope of that would be.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, anything else?
I'm good, thank you.
That's it on our end, JP.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And an email will be sent out summarizing some of what's been discussed.
Yes.
You guys talk very quickly at times, and I'm not able to keep up.
We will definitely put that in memo format and send it out to you within the coming week.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we really appreciate y'all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.